Hey guys, so for this video, we're going to be building a set of lights for a 2011 to 2015 Chevy Cruze. We want this particular set here. First things first, we're going to go ahead and buff the lenses. Very common on lights when you get them. You will have a haze on the lens, and that is actually from the plastic that covers it. So I like to use a Torx buffer with a black wheel, red wheel, something like that. It doesn't have to be too aggressive. But I do use a V34, which has a little bit of a grit to it, but it's not bad. Put a little dab on there. Now I'm going to go ahead and apply a ceramic coating to the lens itself. And the big thing that this is going to do is that it's going to make it a lot easier to clean off anything that we get on there, any fingerprints, anything like that, as well as helps to protect against any possible scratches or things. You're a lot less likely to accidentally scratch anything up. So this is a great time to add it on. That way we can keep it clean through the building process. So now I'm going to go ahead and turn on the oven, and I'm going to heat it up to about 250 degrees, and that will make it a little bit easier to open these up. These are sealed with a kind of like a gasket maker style permaseal, so it's kind of soft, but it's still not beautiful. A little bit difficult to open up. About 250 for 10 minutes, should be able to open it up pretty good, and then it should be ready to go. Okay, so I got the lights opened, and now I'm going to go around and just make sure they got all of the permaseal out of the light. It does look like most of it stuck to the lens cover itself, so the back side looks good. I'm actually just going to set that to the side. On the front side now, I'm just going to pull out. There's a couple little screws that hold the bezel into the lens. We're going to pull that out. So there's 4 screws holding that in place. And now that is out, and now I have the back side. Now we're going to go over to the bench, and we're going to get all that permaseal off. So for the lens, I've laid down a towel here, and I'm going to use a razor blade, just like this, to chase around it. This is a really soft permaseal. It's a lot more like a gasket maker, so this will work really well. So I'm going to go ahead, cut off as much as I can, clean it up, and then we'll move on to the next step. So I got the majority of it out, and you can still see some black around the edges, but that's just a really light layer on there. If you really want to work at it, you could probably get it clean, but it's all going to be covered in black butyl in the end anyways, so I'm not going to worry about it. The key parts is not to touch the inside of the light. Very important to be very cautious inside to make sure that you don't smear anything. So for this light, the layout that we're going to do is behind here, there are some LEDs as well as in the corner. We're going to remove all that, replace it all with addressable, as well as these fake halos. On this particular set, the halos don't even light up, but we're going to change that using some different halos. I'm going to be using our UCS 2904. These are 12 volt addressable halos. One big benefit to these over the SKs is the reliability level of these is off the charts. They can take quite a bit of abuse and just keep on going. It's kind of impressive just how well these last. So this entire build will actually be UCS based. We're going to have UCS demonized. We're going to have UCS infinity mirrors. That's right, infinity mirrors. We're going to have UCS halos, UCS strips here, and UCS in the corner. The entire light 12 volt UCS. So UCS 2904, it is something that Next Level Neo has taken further than any other brand out there. We do a lot with the UCS. Hopefully we can help make it a little bit more of an industry standard here, especially for the automotive world. The UCS it's so much better. So I got all the LEDs installed and all the glue is drying, so I'm not gonna do any wiring yet. We're gonna do that as soon as all the glue is dry, make sure that everything is right where we want it to be. But I am going to measure for my infinity mirrors so we can go over to the computer, cut those out, and get them ready to drop in. The idea with the infinity mirrors on this set is that they will be placed on the high beam projector spot, which is on the inside of the car. And I'm just going to secure that to the back. That should create some nice steps. We will use the UCS strips that were designed with infinity mirrors in mind. So this is actually going to be my first build with infinity mirrors using the UCS 2904. Definitely anxious to see how that turns out. So we'll go over to the computer, cut out the plates, let everything dry here, then we'll come back and do the wiring. So first thing we're going to do, open up our BeamWell software. I can go in here, I can hit camera, and I've already loaded up my medium in there. Now let's say you want to etch lenses, if that's something you want to do. Having a camera is going to be vital to being able to etch the lenses using your laser cutter. As you can see, I've scanned and it takes little images of each thing. Now this is not 100% accurate, so it can be off by just a little bit. So for this, it's pretty simple with infinity mirrors, anything round like that. It's just a circle. So all we're going to do, we're going to grab our circle tool and we're just going to create a basic size circle. Then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to punch in my parameters, which we were doing 2.75 inches. And I'm going to need 2 of them. So I'm going to get that first one lined up right there, trying to maximize the mirror material. I'm using a little bit of a higher end material here, so it's not extremely cheap, and I don't want to waste any of it. So we got that programmed in. Way to go, and it's lined it up. All I have to do is hit start, and it will start cutting up here. So I came back over to this desk to actually assemble them. I have all my parts here that I need, some wiring, soldering irons there, the LED strips. So the strips we are using, these are the UCS 2904 RGBW. And they are made specifically for infinity mirrors. Now, obviously you can use this for anything you want, but the idea behind these was primarily infinity mirrors. So go ahead and get my gloves on here just to be extra safe. So the first thing you want to do is get your measurements as far as what size you need these to be, and wrapping them around. So I got 2 strips cut and ready to go. So there you have it, 2 infinity mirrors assembled, everything ready to go. Once again, I do have a lot more information on this on our channel. We have a video going into detail on infinity mirror creation, but we just basically made a miniature version that we're going to put on these lights. So I got the mirrors in. I'm just gluing them in place now. One thing that I would consider when you're putting the mirrors in, you're probably going to want to have that first LED at the top. So that's something to keep in mind. So the top of the bezel, the first LED in line, so the wires basically on that mirror, put them on top. And as you can see, I'm just securing it in place there using more of the Gorilla Glue contact adhesive, which is my go-to. I really do like using that stuff. And I'm just holding it in there for a few minutes while it just kind of gets that initial hold, and then I'll let it dry for a little bit. And then the next thing I'm going to do is start working on wiring everything up so we can plug them up and then check them out. So I finished up wiring everything up to get everything running in sequence. We are using a Blue Ghost on this light, which means I'm going to be able to control each section one at a time to flow through. So I don't really have to worry about starting at one end of the light and flowing out. I can just start somewhere and run the wires wherever it makes sense. I just use a little bit of 3M tape to secure that to the side. Everything else is secured with Gorilla Glue contact adhesive, and it is quite secure. I'm going to remove some of this tape that I used, a little bit of electrical tape, just to hold the boards in place while that glue dried. Now that that is done, I can go ahead and hook this up and we can check everything out and make sure. So I am connected to a Blue Ghost right now, running at 12 volts going into the lights. Go ahead and turn that on. And it's just random right now. I don't have it programmed up necessarily to flow extremely uniformly. But as we can see, all the LEDs are working. So we know this front panel is good to go. I can go ahead and set it to the side. We can start working on the back side of the light. So now we're going to move into the back of the light. We are going to be swapping out the projector in this for a bi-LED projector here and getting rid of the high beam projector. So we're going to pull those out. I do have brackets that I designed and cut on the water jet to make our 2.5 inch projector fit in there. And we will be etching the lenses. So that's going to be the first focus here. I'll also drill a couple holes for our breather patches that we'll be installing. And you can get breather patches as well as the projectors on our website. If you do need a bracket for a projector, you can reach out to us and we can make you one. We do have a fair selection of them on our computer. It's not on the website currently. So we may have your size already. If not, you can send in the old projector from the light and we can use that to create a bracket for your light. So I'm going to start tearing this down, getting the projectors out, etching the lenses, adding those patches, and running the wires out the back. So for the demon eyes on this set, I want to keep it 12 volt. I don't want to have to run 5 volt inside the back of the light and in the front of the light for those little pods. So I'm doing something a little bit different since our 12 volt demon eyes are not finished in development yet. Just using the strips here along the top side, and that will actually shine down in. I did secure them with glue, with a little bit more of that Gorilla Glue, just to make sure that they don't try to fall down inside the light. Install is fairly simple, and I'll be able to run all my wires just like normal. So now we got the back side done, the wiring drain out the back, the projector is installed, etched, demonized, all the wiring done. I do have this quick connect here. Now in this case I did change it to a 4-pin quick connect, that way I could send power and ground into the light as well as a data in and a data out, because on this build he is wanting to add some external lighting that he will tap into the light. So that's something you'll have to consider depending on the circumstances. Now I've got on the back side, these wires are coming out. I did tap into the turn signal here. That'll go into the main plug. as well as our inputs and outputs here, which I will add quick connects to those waterproof barrel connectors to make everything more clean, and it should make install a little bit easier too. So this is another something to consider if you're running a bunch of power inside your light. Obviously the gauge of wire is going to be a factor, and you're going to want to make sure that you have something thick enough to carry that power without overheating and possibly melting the wiring. So what I like to do on these plugs, because they only really come in a 22 to 24 gauge wiring, I like to double them up. So I only have 4 wires that need to come into this light to connect to the controller, but I used a 6-pin plug, and I can double up my power and ground. So I actually, in the case of this 6-pin, I'm using white and black for my ground, and I'm using yellow and red for my power. And that means instead of a 22 gauge wire, it's now closer to an 18 gauge. It's probably still just a little bit, maybe a big 20, but it's more than enough. I've ran 4 or 5 amps on that, and I haven't seen any issues. So it's definitely something to consider, depending on your build and what you're doing and how much power you're running, is to double that up. Now on my output, it's going to be a lot lower power. I'm not doing as much. Now you can get 3-pin that are 18 gauge. That is actually it's fairly easy to find. That's not too bad. So in my case though, I am going to be using these that we saw on the site. Generally auxiliary lighting stuff after the headlights is rather low power draw. Still, in this case, if I was doing something that's a higher power draw, like multiple devices or like a large section that's going to have a lot of power, I probably would just use a 5-pin, double up those wires, and that way it turns it into a 3-wire connection on a 5-pin plug. So now we're going to assemble the lights back together. We'll be putting the lens cover on top. We're going to put in the sealant around the edges and put it in the oven at 215 for about 10 minutes. Press it all together, make sure all of our connections are made on the inside of the lights, and then seal around the outside with screws just to make sure that it's got a good seal. So I'm going to do this on another time lapse.